Sounds good, y'all. Appreciate everybody coming out.
Check, check, check.
Hello. Shout out Chrysler Museum. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Chrysler.
Thank you, Chrysler.
Well, let's jump into it. We have two legends on stage with us.
Legends aren't true. We are.
I don't think they need an introduction, but I'm going to give them an introduction anyway. First off, I'm going to introduce Cosmo Baker. Welcome. Shout out Cosmo. Born and raised in Philly, Cosmo was immersed in music from an early age. By his teenage years, he was already DJing at local parties. It wasn't long before his deep knowledge of music and ability to move the crowd set him apart. His career skyrocketed in the early 2000s when he co-founded The Rub, legendary DJ collective and party series in Brooklyn. The Rub became a cornerstone of New York City nightlife, known for its eclectic mix of genres, from hip-hop, funk, soul, and house. Beyond the dance floor, Cosmo has been a trailblazer in DJing, pushing the art form's boundaries through his mixtapes, remixes, and live performances. As a respected voice in the music industry, he's also been a thought leader, frequently sharing insights on the cultural and social impact of music. Today, Cosmo continues to explore new creative avenues, remaining a dynamic force in the music world. So, shout out Cosmo Baker. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
And now on to Stephen ESPO Powers, also hailing from Philadelphia. ESPO started off as a graffiti artist in the late 80s. His bold, thought-provoking messages quickly made him a standout figure in the streets, establishing him as more than just an artist, but a storyteller, deeply connected to the communities that he engaged in. One of his most impactful projects is the Love Letter series, which has transformed urban landscapes worldwide, from Philly to New York, Los Angeles, even Italy and Brazil. These murals focused on themes of love, communication, and community are more than just art. They're public dialogues that resonate deeply with those who encounter them. ESPO's influence extends beyond public murals to his gallery exhibitions, where he explores themes of language, identity, and social commentary. In 2014, he started his residency at the Chrysler Museum, allowing him to further bridge the gap between high art and street culture. Currently, ESPO continues to push the boundaries of what public art can achieve, creating works that inspire and connect communities. So, thank you for being here, Steve.
Wow, thank you.
Well, let's start off. You guys know each other,
A little bit.
both Philly natives. Let's talk about that a little bit.
It was all the way back to 1989, if I am not mistaken. Young fledgling graffiti writer such as myself, I was writing Denek at the time. It was a very, very tried and true Philadelphia trend to create a graffiti moniker, which was consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. So Rasan, Barak, etc. I chose Denek. And the DNK, which stood for the Dirty Nasty Kid. I don't really know why I decided to choose that, but at 14 years old, your frontal lobes aren't necessarily fully formed. But graffiti was always something that was kind of omnipresent in Philadelphia and just kind of growing up in the city, especially Philadelphia kind of being one of the epicenters of graffiti culture historically worldwide. And one of the things which I would love to do was to walk up and down these train tracks, which are off of the Schuylkill River off of 30th Street. And I remember one day I saw a piece which said Rain, R-A-I-N, and Lila, L-I-L-A. And the R-A-I-N was actually in the form of a dog chasing the L-I-L-A, which was in the form of a cat. So I don't necessarily have photographic evidence of what it did, but it was legitimately something which was so far removed from traditional graffiti that I had known at that time. Little did I know that Rain was a nom de plume of ESPO. We kind of connected not too long after that, I think.
I married Lila.
Yes.
She still writes.
Yeah, that's
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was just about finished with graffiti in 1989. I was wrapping it up. I was 21 years old and I was ready to be an adult. But Cosmo and our mutual friend Mies and a few other people would not tolerate this. So I was encouraged to come back out, which I did. And I thought I'd write Rain for a while just to, Philly also has the tradition of these names that you can write really well as tall as possible. And Rain was just kind of a dumb word that really related or really, it allowed itself to be written that way. So it was really fun to write that way. And it was kind of an odd name, but I did draw an outline that said Lila for my girlfriend at the time. And it was a cat. And I was like, okay, that's super cute. I've been listening to the B-side of, I forget what the A-side is. B-side is La 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 He 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 by Prince.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a really funny Prince song about a dog and a cat. And I was also listening to Atomic Dog. So, I was literally making a piece of graffiti that kind of reflected these two songs. But I had the first half, like the Lila, it took 5 minutes. To draw a dog that said Rain took like 2 weeks or something. It was like absurdly difficult. And I've gotten myself into those jams like over and over again, where I start out with an idea, but in a flash of inspiration, and then I'm really stuck trying to finish the idea for weeks at a time, sometimes months, sometimes. But this is a cute piece. It's a tried and true tradition of putting your girlfriend's name on a wall to impress her. It works. If you're at an impasse in your relationship,
take notes.
Yeah, take notes. It's an old thousands of years old tradition that we just continue. So
you guys met shortly after that. How was that first encounter? Like what actually brought you guys together to meet face to face?
I hated this guy. I couldn't stand him. No, well, the funny thing is that at the time there was a band in Philadelphia called Stepping Razor. I'd never heard them. All I know is that their stickers were everywhere. And Stepping Razor is a reference to Peter Tosh song, right? And it was kind of through that I ended up actually meeting ESPO. This is back when you were on like 22nd Street?
21st.
Yeah. But then not too long after that, you moved to West Philadelphia, which is when you formed Groovy Monster. And, I kind of became the really young, impressionable, what's the term? The grommet, right? The who just kind of showing up in these older guys' houses. They're like, hey, I want to, you guys are cool. I want to hang out with you guys.
We would buy beer.
Yeah.
We were reliable beer purchasers. Kaz was 16. I think Kenny was 16. I was 21. It's an absurd gulf of time, but graffiti kind of equalized us a little bit. And Philly was like it was a junkyard of just like no parents, no rules, nobody cared. And, nothing, no rules applied. So we did a lot of hanging out, and South Street was just an amazing place where you could anything could happen and always did. And there's also Rittenhouse Square, which was like just this beautiful 1 square block of manicured, like ideal upscale perfection. It looks like Gramercy Park without the fences, but like teenagers of all types would hang out there. It was a meeting place, and graffiti was a meeting place for like every strata of society, high and low. Everybody was welcome. Everybody was accepted. And we did a lot of really important hanging out from like 89 to like 93, I guess. And Stepping Razor was a hardcore band, and it was like a super positive hardcore band. It like depressed us to no end that Pennsylvania's full of like racist meatheads. We couldn't understand it, but there was a lot of racist punk rock, Nazi type guys. And just by the fact that my friends had a band called Stepping Razor, invited like all of this attention from the neo-Nazi weirdos, which was fine because they were all like real losers. Like, I mean, exponentially more losery than you can imagine. And Cosmo, I remember one time Cosmo spotted one of them in like 1990 or something. And Cosmo like followed this guy all down South Street. And as he was like walking, he was pulling people with him. So it's like a gang of like 15 people following this guy back to his car. And the guy like went to jump in his car, and I think like a wrench fell out of his jacket or something.
I do remember this.
Yeah. And it was just like he drove off in a panic. Like,
yes. And Posey was there. A bunch of people were there.
Yeah, it was, you know, and that's the way it should be. So we didn't want to be like, I think they started Stepping Razor not thinking like, hey, we're going to be this positive force, but we were forced into it and we accepted it. But you know, it was a very strange few years of you know, going to shows, getting in fights at shows, getting into all types of like funny altercations, not funny altercations, and then like cops, like at least on 2 occasions, cops showing up to break up a fight. They're like, "What are you guys fighting about?" And when they found out what we were fighting about, like one group would get let off the hook, and one group with the Nazis would be like thrown in the back of a cop car.
It's interesting to me, kind of bringing back to what you're talking about, graffiti being a place, right? Because it very much is that. And you know, full disclosure, I mean, as somebody who's been involved with music my entire life, 35 plus years as a career, graffiti was my first home. And by home, I mean there's a certain tribalism with graffiti, right? You know, we're the I don't want to say we're the losers, but we're the rejects, we're the outcasts, we're the people who may be coming from the fringes of cities and places and communities that, you know, might not necessarily have access to resource, might not necessarily have support structures. And when you're a kid, when you're an adolescent, and you mentioned it before, when your brain is not fully formed, and you're raging with hormones, and most importantly, you are still trying to find your identity, and you have a drive and a desire to kind of carve your place or to carve your name, no pun intended, on the world. You know, graffiti really kind of welcomed with open arms, but I think that's also kind of an exaggeration, because there's definitely a hazing process and a certain boot camp that you have to go to until you're accepted within the crew. But you know, I think that there was, in the sense of us finding this collective the craft of ways in which we can express ourselves individually, because it's an individual sport. It's not a team sport per se. But we also were able to find our tribe and find our community, and how much that went on to inform us in the artistic and the all the other endeavors that we have done over the course of decades. But, you know, as people and as comrades in this. So,
yeah, I remember one time there was, you know, we would go to meetings, and there were these, you know, amazing affairs where, you know, 50, 60 or more people would get together. And it'd be like every strata of society from every neighborhood. And I remember there was a legendary, and he's not a legend because he's really true, but there's a guy named Ra Ra that we grew up with. Ra Ra's probably 65 now, maybe. And Ra Ra was just like a towering voice of authority. He was, you know, a general, and we were, you know, corporals maybe. And he, at one of these meetings, told me, like, you don't have any tags in my neighborhood. You guys just only tag downtown. Really disappointed. And I don't like that New York style of writing that you're doing. You need to do Philly styles, and you need to be in my neighborhood. And I said, okay, great. Where's your neighborhood? He's like, you know, around 15th and Erie. So I called up Cosmo and borrowed a bicycle from him. And we were just like two goofy kids, like with baskets. I think I had a bike with a basket with flowers on it. And we rode up to 15th and Erie, and we wrote graffiti around this neighborhood. And, the next time we saw Ra Ra, he was like, okay, you listened.
So, speaking of, kind of like your early experiences with graffiti, and you spoke about Stepping Razor being a hardcore band, but being super positive. Did that kind of have any influence, as you progress with writing and some of the things that you are now known for, just the positive message that you spread?
I mean, Stepping Razor was it was really, I think I wrote a song for Stepping Razor called Crack Attack that was about the joys of smoking crack. And, but it was, yeah, the deal. This kid knows the deal. But it was we were positive, just like we showed up and we just, we were having fun and we weren't hurting anybody except for people that were asking for it. But I wanted to mention that just because what happens with hardcore kids is there's a moment where they turn a certain age and they're like, okay, now we got to be serious musicians. And, the guys, the rhythm section of Stepping Razor decided that the move was to be like a jam band, but they didn't really call it a jam band, but that's clearly what they were. It was these intense, 10-minute songs that were just 40 different parts and just weird jazz tunings and turnarounds. It was they should have been on Discord Records or something, but there was no place for them. They were just they were called Groovy Monster. They really lived up to the name. And it gave me an opportunity to work on my MC skills, which was absurd. I was the Sugar Cubes. Anybody remembers that band? It was basically Bjork, but there was a guy who would say things really weird, and he would just say these words that just complimented the music in a very strange way. That's what I did. That was me.
It wasn't limited to that, though. So,
it wasn't just that, but that's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah, so Steve turned me on to a lot of different music in life. I mean, he basically was the first guy that said, would sit me down and say, Cosmo, you need to listen to Problem and Funkadelic. Cosmo, you need to listen to Fela Kuti. Cosmo, you need to listen to Gil Scott-Heron. And that artist right there is actually important because my first exposure to Gil Scott-Heron was listening to Steve's cover version with the Groovy Monster of Home is Where the Hatred Is. Right?
Yeah.
So, that it was a watershed moment for me. But also, I mean, I think that, I don't necessarily know how much this is, we're just kind of, this is full disclosure. We've known each other for decades. And so I know that there's going to be ways that this,
we're going to ramble.
Yeah, we're just going to freestyle a little bit. So the Groovy Monster house in West Philly was my place that I would go as a young reject looking to find my way and to find friends. So it was there where I learned so much. And I also had so many interesting experiences. One of which was, I remember Steve once put into my hand a copy of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Says, Cosmo, you must read this. And I remember it was that, and he had that and a bottle of Vladimir vodka, and said, you must read this. And so I remember vividly reading it and with a fever pitch reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I'm a very, very fast reader, and I was also, at 16 years old, taking sips of the vodka. And I'm sure that there's at least a few people who have read the book or have seen the film, right? So there's there we go. All right. So the point where the one guy is in the bathtub and he's asking his guy to throw the radio in to the bathtub. Right. And I'm just drinking and drinking and drinking and reading and reading and reading. And that was such an intense moment of the book that I just knew that I was going to be physically ill. And I actually started to become physically ill. And Steve was upstairs and I didn't know there was this big house and it was and I was trying to walk around, trying to find the bathroom. I couldn't find the bathroom. And I was like, Steve. And then unfortunately I had to go. I had to vomit, and I said, the only place I know where to vomit is out off of the front porch. So I'm trying to get out of the front porch, of the front door, and it was locked. And so I didn't know what to do. So I started. I'm not trying to be graphic or gross or anything. That's what I started. Trying to hold it in, but it's coming out. And then somebody's dog. I don't know if it was Eric's or somebody's dog just came up. A very, very friendly dog just kind of came up and started jumping on my knee, jumping on my leg, trying to, are we going out for a walk? And I'm just throwing up, and then the dog's here, and somebody started to throw up on the dog, and and it was horrible. It was horrible. But and then finally I was able to get the door open and finish up. So there's no correlation to the rest of our artistic careers, but it's just an anecdote that I just right now remembered being on the stage with you. Thank you so much for your influence and wise guidance.
I still have that copy of Fear and Loathing. It's disgusting. And Gil Scott-Heron ended up being like in a long career of interviewing people and talking to people. Gil Scott-Heron was the first person I interviewed, and he was a very gracious man to give me 5 minutes of his time. And if you were starting off a journalism career, like starting off with 5 minutes with Gil Scott-Heron is a pretty high point.
Yep.
And it's only going up from there. But that was like, it was amazing that Cosmo was the guy that I could say, hey, check out this Gil Scott-Heron record, and he would come back with like the rarer Gil Scott-Heron record, or like, hey, here's this band Parliament Funkadelic, and he'd suddenly have like the rest of the collection. Like him and his brother Walker just had the knack for finding everything. I think, is Walker still collecting records?
Yeah, I think so.
These guys they had the knack, and Cosmo's been documented in the New York Times for having the knack, in a way that, there's a lot of people that collect records, but there's a few people that the records find them over and over again. And Cosmo is definitely one of those guys who just, he gets the product. He gets the records. They find him. He doesn't find them, but he puts himself in good places, and obviously, he doesn't miss.
Well, I mean, I think it's it's a little bit more than well, thank you, but also I think it's a little bit more about just kind of the questioners themselves, right? First of all, obviously, when you create these friendships and these bonds with people, and there's that. I don't want to necessarily say it's like an older brother, younger brother, or a mentor-mentee kind of relationship, but you meet somebody who's a little bit older, a bit more experienced with life, even if it's only a span of 5 or 6 years. I guess that's kind of our age gap, whatnot. There's a certain residual which you pick off of, from the way that you just see somebody maneuvering through life, right? And specifically with Steve, it was a really interesting thing just to see this guy who's an older friend of mine, but maneuvering through life and also maneuvering through his craft with graffiti in such a unique way that was basically bucking the trend in every facet and every sense. The graffiti that he was doing was unlike 99% of everything else that was traditional Philadelphia style, right? And so like the idea of picking up the residual vibes of just how somebody is able to, carve their own lane, So I think that's also kind of what it is that we do in society. We do what we do, and then somehow somebody will glean from that and take it, put their own spin on it, and allow that to evolve, and then that gets passed on and then passed on and passed on, and that's how culture works. Culture works because it's shared.
So you're the younger homie, and you guys are exchanging music. Like, at what point did you notice, Steve, that he was starting to really blow up? Like when did that in the timeline? You see,
I've told this story before, and I think Cosmo sees it differently, but it's there was an amazing party that happened in a gym at 19th and Chestnut in Philly, which is like, commercial district that's ebbed and flowed over all 100 years. But at this particular time, like, they were able to throw like a 5-floor party. They were doing like a real New York style party with DJs on different floors. And Cosmo got to spin like in the hip hop zone. And it was a rough crowd. It was a funny crowd that was just like
A rough crowd.
everybody turned up, and everybody, it was a central enough location that everybody was there. And Cosmo, he'd already been DJing long enough that people knew who he was. There was already like a little bit of jealousy towards him, or just like awareness and people wanting to know like what he was going to do in the midst of this rough, rowdy crowd. And he started spinning, there was like DJs, I think, are passing off, like going from DJs are like one DJ finishes, there's a bit of a lag, it's a bit quiet, there's a technical difficulty, whatever, like tension's building in the room, people are mad and yelling. And Zulu, the one-man gang, did his best to calm people down and like redirect the energy a little bit. But when it was Cosmo's turn, like Cosmo steps up and he had a plan in mind and he was going to follow through with it. But he spins the Duke of Earl, the original song by the Platters. It was
Gene Chandler.
Yeah, Gene Chandler. Thank you. And people are just like furious that he's doing this. People are so mad. And it's a bop. I think it's a bop. I'm going along with it. But I'm in a position where I could see Cosmo like queuing up the next record and he's ready to do something. Nobody else can really see, or they're not paying attention to what he's about to do. But he just bides his time and he lets the record play to the point where like people are really screaming and yelling at this point and booing, a lot of boos. It's Philly, so there might have been some batteries thrown. No, it was getting bad. And I could see his hand that was on the record that he was going to drop. He queued it up, but his hand was visibly shaking. And I was like, this guy's going to have a breakdown if this doesn't work. But, he drops the beat and it's Cypress Hill, Hand on the Palm.
As I think so, yes.
Yeah, so it's the Cypress Hill song that samples Duke of Earl. And the crowd goes nuts. They literally pop off in a completely positive direction. And you could see like 200 pounds of weight lift off of Cosmo. And it was like, this guy's made it. This guy's really doing it. Like this guy can like put his head in the mouth of the lion and like get it back out in time. And, it was great to see.
Yeah. I'm so glad to relive my past trauma on stage in front of a bunch of friends here in Norfolk.
But it was a victory, right? Did you
No.
feel that?
No. So, yes, absolutely right. And I appreciate that. And just for context, this is Philadelphia. This is the mid-'90s, right? Early 90s, right? And,
They don't have phones. This is entertainment for them.
Right. But it's also, it's basically, it's a tough crowd. It's a tough crowd. And Philadelphia, by nature, has tough crowds in general, for music, for sports, obviously, for art, right? And I think that's something that's indicatively Philadelphia, is that, we love you, and when we love you, we show it to you, but you have to be good. And if you're not good, no matter what your discipline is, like, we will let you know, right? So, but I'm thinking in the sense of, in kind of that experience with me, it was very much like the idea that I have, I want to stick to it, and I do not want to deviate from the idea, because I believe in the idea and I believe in the movement behind it, and the reasoning why I'm trying to express this one specific movement, to people, which may be, again, playing a 1956 doo-wop record by Gene Chandler at a hip-hop crowd in 1992 might be a little bit off kilter, but if you believe in it and you figure out a way of how to deliver it, which thankfully I did, because I would be in And what he was going to say at the end in therapy. But
You'd be a real estate agent. It's okay.
yes, right. Yeah. But I kind of think of in a sense that is, if you do it and you do it with conviction and you do it with belief and you do it and you just allow it to pass through, people will come to it. It's like if you build it, they will come, right?
How do you can't mentor that? Like, that's just got to happen. Like, you can't.
Right. But I also think that in a sense, it's like if I think about you and the way that you've made your progression through graffiti, and I call it graffiti because I will never call it street art, right?
Yeah.
To the art that you make now, you've seen, the world has caught up to you, and the art world and just the world in general has caught up to you, because, partly because you believed and you had conviction in, this is what you need to say and this is how you need to say it. And I think that that's for a creative person and for an artist, I think that that's once you kind of accept that and embrace that, you've passed over a threshold, so.
When do you think you saw that Steve he was reaching further than just Philly?
Well, in reaching further than just Philly, probably when On the Go really started to pop. Now, On the Go was I'm sure you want to opine in on this, but On the Go is a graffiti magazine that Steve put together early 90s at Kinko's copies, Xeroxing the whole thing, and graffiti, you have to understand this is pre-internet, right? And so the only way that people could learn about scenes that were happening in other cities and other countries was through the trading of photographs, right? And so the documenting of these photographs and these scenes in local magazines became a really important benchmark for the culture. And Steve decided that he was going to start On the Go, which was his brainchild and his baby. But the thing that differentiated On the Go was that there was so much commentary, social and political, otherwise commentary, and so much of an intellectual subtext that was happening with the creation and the production of the magazine. And like he invited me to do record reviews. I've never written anything in my life, aside from the stuff that I needed to do at school. And he invited me to do, I'm going to give you a column. Yeah, I want you to write record reviews for like these, these Blue Note jazz records from like the 1970s. I'm like, okay, cool, sign me up, which actually ended up being a huge formative reason of why I now write about jazz in the New York Times, But it was around that time that I saw that the scope was really beginning to widen. And bear in mind, Philly and New York, it's no more than 2 hours away, right? So
99 miles.
Yeah, so getting to New York from Philadelphia was always very easy through public transportation, or we caravan up, or figuring out how to get up there. So being people who were in one of the smaller fish bowls, right, one of the smaller ponds, right, people who have particular drive and hunger, we're going to go up to the biggest playing field on planet Earth, right? Or at least in the United States, to kind of see what Zap was about. So that was also another thing in the sense of starting to see how specifically ESPO's both artistic vision was beginning to broaden, right? And also all the ancillary aspects of it, like the magazine, like being able to, find ways to different ways to get the message out, even stuff that's not even on walls, if that makes sense.
I had a really great conversation with Old Dirty Bastard when after he released his record. He was under a lot of scrutiny for, he did that video with MTV where he went and picked up a welfare check in a limo, and it divided the room. Like, people thought it was amazing, and people, a lot of people took umbrage at it. So, and we put in a lot of work with the record label and his the people working with him. Like, we really want to talk to this guy. We'll do the right thing. And they gave us the opportunity to go to a hotel in Manhattan and talk to him. And Russell, like, cracked open the door and looked at us and thought we looked crazy and just was like, all right. And he gave us, like, he's like, I'm giving you 5 minutes. Like, what's your first question? And I said, what kind of deodorant do you use? Are you like a Brute guy or an Old Spice guy? And he's like, oh, thank you. These are the kind of questions that I've been asked. I just want to talk. I don't want to get into, like, how did you come up with the idea for this? No, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to talk because I'm a Brute guy. And we proceeded to have like an hour of enlightening conversation about everything. And eventually, when the interview came out, we had the idea, we had a bunch of crazy content for that issue. And it was like, we just did what magazines do. We took the most outrageous sound bites from every interview that we had. And we did like a National Enquirer type cover. And the old Dirty Bastard was like him in this bathrobe that he put a D on. And it said, Old Dirty Bastard, is he Judy Garland's love child? Because he was really fascinated at the time with Judy Garland. He thought, like, he saw a documentary on Judy Garland and he's like, I am just like her. The fact that, they wanted her to do things and they kept giving her drugs to like show up to. It was really it was really prescient and it was really sad what he was telling us. But the time was like really funny. It was like, Old Dirty Bastard thinks he and Judy Garland are similar. And in fact, they were being treated the exact same way as like this profit center for the record label or the industry as a whole. And it turned out to be a super sad story. But in the summer of '95, when we published this magazine, like Vibe magazine, shout out to the Vibe neighborhood, but Vibe magazine circulated a memo that said, we need to be more like this magazine. And they put us in their like hot trends of '96 issue with P. Diddy and Biggie on the cover. And we were like, we're doomed. Like, we don't have any money. We don't really have that much industry support. And the most successful Time Warner magazine in the world is looking at us and is inspired by us. Like, we're not going to survive. But we did make this like great. We got really visible in New York in a way that we never would have in Philadelphia. And it was a really, for 6 months, it was very exciting. And then the reality of like having to continue with no industry support set in, but for 6 months we had like really great meetings and possibilities were happening. But, that's the thing with like being underground, being like having something like On the Go, which was a decidedly underground magazine. We had an offer to buy out the magazine, to make it national, to make it this like successful publication with just a stroke of a pen. It would have been like, we would have gotten the money and the wherewithal to publish on a regular basis, to pay our writers, to like do all the things that magazines do. But we would have to give up 100% of the magazine, and I said, can I get 1%? Like, can we get like 3%? They're like, no. And the guy making the deal told us point blank, me and my partner, Ari, he said, you have to understand, you're the prostitutes and we're the pimps. And that's it. And like, you're never going to get a better deal. Like, that's the deal. I was like, oh, that makes it so easy. No. I was like, I'll be my own man. He's like, you'll never make it. I was like, I don't care. What does make it? If that's making it, then I don't care. Right. And so the offer was made to our friends at Ego Trip and our friends at Stress Magazine. They both turned it down. And then one guy in and one of the camps took the offer. He broke camp from his magazine, took the offer, and it became XXL. So it lives on today. But the compromises are just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like, it's no fun. So
On the go.
on the go.
I guess maybe as you kind of started transitioning into the major gallery scene from graffiti, was there any similar feelings there or situations that kind of reminded you of that deal that tried to go through with On the Go?
There is, but it was actually like we got really lucky going into the gallery world, because the first guy that gave us a show, on a real level, we did an independent show in Philadelphia at a really amazing institution called the ICA. It's really like institutions like Virginia Mocha and Chrysler Museum, where, the next generation or the next waves are like germinated. They start in places like this, just like, small institutions with staff willing to take risks. So the Philadelphia ICA gave us a show in the summer of 1999 that we called Indelible Market. It was me, Barry McGee, and Todd James. And then Jeffrey Deitch, who was working with Barry at the time, brought the show to New York. And he, protected us. He told us straight. He was honest about everything. He was a forthright, like, super interesting guy. This is a guy that, like, gave the eulogy at Jean-Michel Basquiat's funeral. So, like, his cred was, like, impeccable. And his whole approach to business was really forthright and honest. And, you couldn't ask for a better, partner than that. It's rare to have somebody like that. So we got really lucky that way. And what we found out after that was, there was people that were buying artwork from the show that were looking for us. They would they were buying the pieces and they were asking us, like, can you make 100 of these? Like, is there a possibility of, like, more of these? And we were all like, no, we're making new and different art. Like, I had learned and I had seen from other artists that if you have something really successful, you need to put that to the side and work on the next thing, and maybe, reset the table every time and try to, like, come up with new things every time, because it's going to expand your list of tools that you'll have. And you're not just stamping out this, like, it's not like making cupcakes or pizza. Like, you should be trying to do different things all the time. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you grow every time. And we learned that, there were people on the periphery ready to, like, they were looking for cupcake makers. They were looking for people to make the one piece and make 1,000 of them. And hey, make it in bronze and make it 20 feet tall and make it so we can put it in front of, like, every important art building, every important, apartment building in New York. And we just couldn't wrap our heads around it. We weren't even interested in it, but other people were. So, and that's the way the world moves. Like, I think art it solves a problem every day, and it fulfills, like, the needs and the wants of an artist every day. And it takes time for it to be something that, works for everybody universally, on the level of, like, Van Gogh or Keith Haring or Basquiat. Like, it's not immediate. It takes time. And there's a way to, like, game the system where, but we can make it valuable in the meantime. Like, we don't have to wait for it to get to that level of spiritual strength for people. We can just make it valuable and make it this commodity object, this prestige that we sell. And it's tempting. It's always tempting to look at that stuff, but it's also, like, when you get on the other side of it, it's the same thing as, like, working at a magazine where you don't own any of it. You're towing the line and you're doing what people want. You start to think about your audience, and then you're trapped. Not to be a downer.
So, Cosmo, starting off house parties, then clubs, then touring. What are some of the things that you're kind of looking forward to, in the future?
Paying my bills first of all, which is always an important thing. But I mean, I think that especially kind of being here on the stage with Steve and you, Brian, two people whom I respect immensely. I think that to me the biggest thing is just like I was saying earlier, like it's about the work. Ultimately, I feel as if though I've been blessed to have been able to figure out a way of having some sort of longevity in my one little small facet of a larger industry, which is the music and the entertainment industry. So I feel blessed that I have got that. And obviously, it's because of a lot of hard work and diligence, and and even when one does all that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it translates, right? But I feel grateful for the fact that I'm able to do the work, and like Steve was saying about how with art, how it takes time, right? I think that transcends medium, right? In terms of art, right? Because creating something fills a void and fills a need that almost everybody has, even if they don't know it. Creating, whether it be a visual piece or you're writing a song or you're composing a play or a poem. What it is that it allows people to find a place where they have an external voice that they might not necessarily have within themselves. So like even in the sense of something as basic or as elementary as me, playing disco records at a club, which I'll be doing tonight at OU Lounge, starting at 9:00 this evening. You understand that it is it's an act of service, right? And I don't necessarily know if you agree with this or if anybody agrees with this, but again, the service and the work is the thing that actually pushes me forward. Knowing that in one way that I'm a steward of everything that I've ever gleaned from every influence and every experience that has come before me, and going back decades, centuries, the span of human existence. But it's important because it's how it is that we push ourselves forward as a society and as a species to a place where we can continue to not just survive, but we can thrive, which is a saying that Steve said to me about 34 years ago, and says survival without thriving is a mundane existence. And it's something he said to me about 33 or 34 years ago, and that became crystallized in my head. So, I think that that's probably the most important thing for me as somebody who is compelled to create, you don't really want to hear about, I've got this thing happen or that thing happen and whatnot, And I think that, the most important thing is the why we do what we do.
I think going back to something that you had said, Steve, that I think is similar to this, is just like that kind of every mark that you make is a prayer. Could you elaborate on that?
Why? That's kind of good.
Yeah.
It could be. I mean, it really is like, it's great listening to Cosmo and knowing that, like, Cosmo, it's not a facade. Like, he's a really Zen guy, and he's a really, like, centered guy. He speaks truth to power, and he's deadly serious about the music that he plays, even if it's, disco music from what was the best year for disco music?
2024, man, because it's still alive. Disco never died.
He's still giving me
disco
great
was
records.
The music of resistance and power and empowerment of black and marginalized people, brother. Disco is it, my brother.
Okay. He's speaking truth to powers. See that? And but I feel like as a writer, as an artist, like, I'm divided between these two. And I marry them. Like, I put them together, like, between writing and painting. It's it can be like it really, you can make every mark count, and you can make every single time that you put a pen to a paper, you can make it matter. And even if, I spend a lot of time just rambling with a pen and just goofing off, but it's like a dowsing stick. Like I'm trying to like hit something, hit a water source and have it like come out. It's just like, it really is just like trying to tap into a vein of creativity. And the fact that like, I'm definitely late mid career as an artist, and I still have ideas. I'm still excited. I have new possibilities. I have new things I want to see and bring into the world. And I'm really charged. Like I had a feeling it was going to be this way. I thought it was going to be. Picasso was my guy. I wanted to be like half nude in my boxers, like in my 70s, cranking out the best paintings. Like that's still the goal. He wore mismatched socks too. So
let's talk a little bit about, you've been spending a lot of time in Tokyo. What's your connection to Japan?
When I went to Tokyo in 2000. I went twice in like a month, in like December of 99. Well, December of 2000 and January of 2001. And they already had phones that had emojis on them. And it was something that I saw and I thought like, oh, this is going to, you could just see like, this is going to be a wave that's going to just crash into culture, and it's going to be everywhere. And I was already making work that was trying to distill, like I was always fascinated in advertisements, like the little phone that would be next to a phone number in an advertisement, or just anything, any marginalia that would just be in a newspaper, like in the back pages of a newspaper when it'd be tire ads and ads for burglar bars and sandwich shops and these little graphics and these little drawings. My eye was always drawn to those things, and I was making work that looked like that. So in going to Japan, you see like that's a major part of what they do. Like even government agencies have cute characters to represent their government agency. Like it's a major driver of what they do. And I think it's something that it speaks to wanting to be clear, wanting to be kawaii or cute for the kids. And it's something that I think takes off like the harder edges of, a difficult life. So I've always been influenced by Japanese graphic design and the way, and these like things that Japanese people sometimes don't even see anymore. It's just like the smallest graphics on cups and trucks and, in the streets, and just the whole visual presentation. And I'd been taking it and being influenced by it, bringing it into my work, that at some point it made sense to like, I should just bring this all back home and set up a shop in Tokyo and just be at the cross section where all this stuff is happening, and just, open up like a little farmer stand there where I'm just bringing it back and giving it back to hopefully the generation that is currently making art there now. So I spend a lot of time going to shows, and artists come in or people come in with ideas. They need a logo for this or for that. And I'm happy to do anything for anybody that asks. And, if that time will allow. And it's just recharged me, and it's given me like a whole new direction to go and to work with. I think it's refined my art a lot, and it's made me a better artist, hopefully a more conscious, giving artist. And I'm working on a project there now that's like, in Japan, there's advertising that appears on the electric poles where all throughout the city. And then these beautiful metal advertisements that you don't even see anymore because they're everywhere. But it's really cheap to advertise on these panels, and it's a really cheap setup charge. So I've rented 30 of these panels all across Tokyo, and I told a story graphically across these 30 panels. when I go back in September, we're going to have this project where we want people to hunt and find these different panels in these different neighborhoods of Tokyo. And for me, it's a way of getting to know more of Tokyo. And then there'll be stamps at hopefully at different locations. That's a big part of Japan, where they have stamp rallies, where at train stations, they'll have a beautiful little table set up with an ink pad and a stamp that'll be for that particular station. And people will take like a 12-hour train ride, commute 12 hours to a station to get the stamp in their book, turn back around and get back on the train. So I love that, and I want a piece of that. So we'll have 30 stamps, 30 locations. We've made these amazing zines that will tell the story. And we had to deal with the electrical company and the city government to a degree, where they're just so specific about what they would allow on their property. It was very eye-opening and interesting. And of course, like I told this rambunctious story that was like, they were like, they needed to be a lot more polite than what I was getting across. So I made it a little too American, and it's now a little more Japanese than it was before. But it's a really interesting public art project that I hope, will take root next month. Keep an eye out.
Awesome. So, what would you say the role of traveling had an effect on your music, Cosmo? Are there any places that really inspired you, to the point where it revitalized, or places that you like to travel that you feel a certain connection to the culture there that is inspiring to you?
It's an interesting thing because, so many of the questions that we're talking about today, you can kind of draw the correlation between music and graffiti, right? And both of our careers and trajectories, right? And I think that growing up in Philadelphia, which is a large city, but it's a large second city almost, right?
Provincial.
Provincial is a great word. I used to call it the biggest little town in the world, right? So, obviously with the proximity to New York, that travel there always was something that was so beneficial for our artistic vision and our drive, right? But as the internet has come into the world, right? You can travel somewhere virtually, right? It's still not the same. Still not the same as being somewhere like Tokyo, where I've been many times, right? Kind of being there ensconced in the streets and around the people, and actually being able to feel what it's like to actually, to be there and to be present, in that place. And I think that's kind of been something that both Steve and I have shared, just the fact that we can kind of go to these places and around the globe. Brazil is a place that I go to a lot. So Sao Paulo and Rio and Belo Horizonte and places like that. And having been there, dozens of times, I think at this point,
Cosmo's had to get his passport expanded twice. Does that happen to you?
It was like the phone book, John.
Oh, yeah. So
maxed it out. Yeah.
So decent. Because Philly guys don't travel. Philly guys, they're proud of staying on their block.
They stay on the block. Yeah, literally people from South Philly, right? And it's literally guys that have stayed on the block for 30 years. And it's just
you left the block?
Bro, what are you doing, bro?
Failed.
Come on, man. We don't want to go in as far as down to Wildwood, down the shore,
I have where I grew up in Overbrook in West Philadelphia, my friends are really disappointed that I left. They're still mad about it. And it's been, decades. But they're still I painted this public art project we talked about earlier. The last time I went home, I was like, have you guys seen the public art project I did right down the street in West Philadelphia? They're like, no.
Legitimately, it's Overbrook, and Overbrook is just a part of West Philadelphia.
I was like, I can't come back here. You guys are really,
yeah.
I'm going to end up in the trunk of a car at some point. They're not letting me off the hook.
I mean, yes. So that's actually very telling of the experiences that we had growing up. It's just like being around people that didn't necessarily have a desire or a drive or hunger, just to kind of, see what's out there, see what's next. And I think that any creative person really kind of needs that as fodder to really kind of find, what it is that they, we all need inspiration, right? However, just to be find it, right? So, I want to say thankfully that I've in my career because, it's difficult being a DJ that only lives in Philadelphia and only plays in Philadelphia, right? That in my career I've been able to kind of go out there and see places and meet people, which is the most important thing, right? Kind of always bringing it back to the reason of art, right? And art is just a way of communication, right? Music is one of the oldest forms of human communication in our species, right? Graffiti is, like Steve said, man, it's people that were writing their names, the girlfriend names to impress them, It goes back to, drawing pictures of, deer in caves, right?
Yeah, that's that's my inspiration. 39,000 years
there you
ago.
go, right?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I mean, the thing about it
No,
is, it's
serious.
like, as humans, we're always going to try to find a way of expressing ourselves, right? So how do we get the inspiration? Part of it is just kind of being connected with other people, and so we're giving these very open-ended answers to the questions.
How great has it been since YouTube has come on? Do you still go through your records to look for records, or are you just going on YouTube first to find stuff?
And yeah, honestly, there's so much out there. The music discovery is never ending. It's endless.
It's infinite.
It's infinite.
It's crazy.
And sometimes I feel as if do I have to kind of truncate the way that I want to, have my receptors open. So I'll listen to, I don't know, as the older I get, and I went from listening to hip hop to listening to house music to.
But what's your
I'm listening to the sounds of humpback whales.
Right.
The whale sounds. That's what I listen to these days. So yeah.
Tokyo traffic.
Yeah.
Right. But what's your main way of getting music these days? When you're looking, or it's looking for you, is it analog or is it digital?
I mean, it's both, probably.
Probably.
I've there's been a huge shift. I don't know if everybody really kind of understands DJing. It's records. Some people might not know what records are. They're physical pieces of vinyl, they used to play. And then DJing went digital for about 20 some years, right?
Yeah.
There's now a huge shift back. It's kind of coincided with the pandemic. I think that a lot of people decided they just needed to slow down, right? And I think a lot of people also felt that there was a certain disingenuous nature as to the way that algorithms are just kind of pushing content our way, and it's not music or it's arts content, So there's been a really pronounced shift back to almost like a slower way of discovering.
It may be music. A conspiracy of chiropractors forcing DJs to
carry the record crates
again. Yeah. Maybe.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think that, part of this kind of slower approach to how it is that we're discovering music has allowed me to kind of be like, all right, I'm going to, go into the jazz section and listen to stuff that, I never would have, would not have been on my radar before, But I mean, I think that there's also I think that those trends are cyclical. I mean, if you think about, in cuisine, there wasn't really a quote unquote slow food movement, 30 years ago or 25 years ago. And now it's what you get. There wasn't a farm to table thing, so kind of in the approach of me as a DJ and somebody who, shares music and is a steward and shepherd, it's like the slower, the better, the less is more, if you can actually make it translate,
What about discovering artists, Steve? I mean, we talk about how are you consuming music now through YouTube? It's we have Instagram. It's versus walking into a gallery and discovering a new artist.
I mean, it's interesting that Instagram is a terrible medium for looking at art. It's just it's not conducive. and I use it all the time, and I promote it. I work with it all the time. But and my studio in New York is at Broadway and White in Tribeca, and the main draw of having a studio in this neighborhood was at one time there was 5 hardware stores, and there was Pearl Paint, like the biggest art store. So like anything you could possibly need, like there was a metal shop, there was a glass shop, like anything you could possibly need. Like there was a famous artist named Donald Judd and a famous artist named Dan Flavin, and the places that they got their metal and their light bulbs was still in business like 10 years ago. They still had light bulbs at Dan Flavin. You could make your own Dan Flavin if you got these Sylvania light bulbs. You might have to fight his estate, but whatever. And all that's gone now, and all that went. There are no more hardware stores in my neighborhood. The metal guy's gone, the fabric's gone, everything's gone. But we hang in. And then in the last like 3 years, every major gallery in New York has opened an outpost in my neighborhood. So suddenly I'm walking around and I'm seeing artists that I saw on Instagram, and now I can see their work. And because it's on my way to work, I just need to like peek through windows. I don't even need to step in. So it's really convenient for me to see what's going on in the art world just by walking to work. And it's been an amazing few years. My son's godmother, Mimi Gross, is like a 74-year-old artist who grew up in this neighborhood. He's got 1,000,000,001 stories about the neighborhood. And now they treat her like the country doctor. Like every gallery is like pulling her in, and she knows like all of these galleries. And she's just like, it's terrible. Oh, this work is terrible. This is good. She's strong opinions. She's right about everything, but it's just charming with that. She'll tell like gallery owners, like, this work is terrible. And I'm like, and they're like, yes, you're right, Mimi. Thanks for coming by today. Yeah. So that's nice.
But I actually do want to kind of piggyback on something you said in regards to the experience of having Instagram as the place where you get your exposure to art and artists first. It's, as somebody also uses Instagram on a pretty frequent basis, and I also don't want to necessarily sound as if I'm a Luddite anti-technology guy, because it's an integral part of all of our lives and whatnot. But there's nothing that can replicate actually having an experience of seeing and actually getting the feeling of being in the presence of art, whether it be visual or musical or a performance or whatever it is. There's nothing that can replicate it. And I also think that people are weary of that being the conduit of how it is that we experience it. I can't explain to you the first time I saw, a 35 by 25 foot piece by Anselm Kiefer hanging on the wall of the Philadelphia Museum of Art that was strewn with molten metal in its paint, in the texture with hay and mud that was incorporated into the canvas, right? Or the first time I saw Mr. Blint, it was a graffiti writer on the tracks of the Amtrak line. Actually being in the presence of, and actually being present when you're experiencing it. It can't be replicated, and I had the extreme privilege of playing at the Newport Jazz Festival a couple of weeks ago, which was like such an incredibly high honor for me, you know what I'm saying? But, you talk about where it is that you experience music for the first time. Like I was out there and, I went out there the day after my performance. So I was there by myself to experience the festival, right? And, some like a babe in the woods, and I'm going into performances with no expectation, with no clue who it is that I was seeing. And legitimately within, 3 songs of seeing Sema Funk he's a performer from Havana, listening to 3 songs and realizing, oh my God, this is one of the greatest musicians I've ever seen in my life, and it's like there's a shift there. It's almost like a sea change, so, if there's any moral to the story, I think that it's like, it's good to put yourself out there. It's good to break out of the comfort zones. It's really, really great to allow yourself to be around other people and have these experiences and have them communally,
It's funny because I used to get so exhausted going into galleries and museums, like the marble floors would just tire me out like immediately. But now I'm like craving it, now it's like when I approach an institution like this, I'm like, I'm going to see something. I'm going to see something I haven't seen before, which I don't know if I get that from my phone anymore. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Well, I wanted to open it up to the audience. Anyone have a question for ESPO or Cosmo?
Cipher sounds. Well, not even cipher visuals.
Some visuals, yeah.
Yeah.
Now's your chance.
I have one question. So when you do your community projects, like how do you, like where do you start? That seems like such a monumental task.
They are. It's really like every time, the more monumental it is, the more you need like community support, you need government support, and community support. And in every one of those projects that we did, there was like one or more liaisons between the community and between the government that could just like make things happen. Like in Brooklyn's like had all the extremes where we had a really interesting guy named Joe Chan who wanted the project to happen. He liked my work. He had government experience. He knew everybody's phone number, but he was in the private sector. And it was like, because it was Brooklyn, I had to compete against like 50 people. My project had to beat out like 50 other people. I won the project, and really thanks to Joe, like, encouraging me every step of the way. And when I won the project, the first building that we were supposed to paint said, no, we don't want you to paint. I don't know if they didn't like my choice or they sold the building in the meantime, but they just like withdrew their support for the project. And so the project should have been dead, but Joe like went and got a better building and got better support and got more people involved. And the next thing you know, we were painting like the Macy's garage, which was like twice the size of the original project. And the project just bloomed from there. So every project that we did in Syracuse and in all these other places, there's always like a Joe Chan type person that like figures it out, that lays all the groundwork, that finds the keys for the locks, and they make it happen. So it's usually a year of that type of negotiations, so that when the paint actually hits the surface, it feels so good. It feels like an outer body experience of like relaxation, like a calm wave just hitting you, because there was like a year of like meetings and holding your breath and talking to the community and trying to meet everybody's expectations and exceed everybody's expectations. So best to keep it small. One person, one property, one permission, done. Doing those large scale projects, it ran its course. Like it was like something that we did in 2009, and we had like 10 years of like people calling us. And in 2015, I wrote a book called Love Letter to the City, where I laid out like everything that you need to do to make these projects happen. And I put myself out of business. Like once I made a how-to book on how to do these projects, like that was it. Phone stopped ringing. But I was free to go do other things. So it's been great. And, coming to town, like, and seeing in Virginia Beach, like how many walls are painted here, how many positive sentiments are painted on those walls. Like, it's something that like anybody can do anywhere they're at. Like, so now I can go do something else.
I think we have time for one more.
stumble upon a good idea that feels great, and then you get stuck, sometimes for weeks or for months. As working artists or creatives, we all get stuck. What do you do to get out of that moment, or do you simply wait on it to be you?
I did a design for this project of MF Doom and JJ Journal called JJ Doom. And I made a Doom logo that really made sense and it was perfect. And it took me like a 10-minute subway ride to figure it out. And I tried submitting it to the label and they were like, that's cool. It's got to say JJ too. And the JJ was like just impossible. And you can bang your head against the wall. That works pretty good. You can tackle it every day. But it really is like something that's just got to come through the side window when you're not expecting it. I think you have to like go out and fish every day and try to find it every day. And it's going to show up when it shows up. Like you have to be in position for it, but that's the job. But I can't tell you how to speed up the process. I can only tell you to be there when it happens. That's the job. I want to catch this lady because I'm sorry. That person over there? Sir, I'm sorry. You're very beautiful.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, like, as a language artist, I know you talk about like your love for Japanese graphic design. Are you kind of like sketching and doodling kind of graphics and letting that inspire language, or are these like phrases or certain things you already have, just kind of figuring out a way to visually represent them? And then I guess the second question is like, where are you sourcing like these quotes and sayings from? Is it things you come up with? Are they parts of like larger writings that you work on, or is it stuff that was inspired by music, or even like through your journalism career, it's like little nuggets that you picked up?
Thank you. Music's a great source of inspiration. I did a painting a couple years ago that said, I forget what it said, but it doesn't matter. I think it's usually like I'll have a visual idea first. Sometimes I'll have a word first, and then they got to find each other. Like I like marrying the two, but I rarely get both at the same time. It happens. It's, I have pages and pages of notes I fill up every day, and I get little scraps. Like language, it's a virus. It's everywhere. It's like, you grab what you can, and sometimes you mishear something. A great example is I misheard or even misread, like total, maybe it's undiagnosed dyslexia, but I thought I saw this idea from this really great artist. His name I'm forgetting now, but I approached that artist and I was like, I love that thing you did. And he said, no, I didn't do that. That's not what I did. I did something else. And I was like, oh, okay, then it's my idea. I'll take that. And it was the idea of an apartment building called Lovewell Terrace Apartments. And, it was like the dumbest, smartest idea I ever had, where it was like, my kid was about 10 years old at the time when I had the idea. And if you Google Lovewell Terrace Apartments, he made a chiptune at like 10 years old. He made a chiptune version of Lovewell Terrace Apart by Joy Division, which is the joke. But he made this really cool chiptune version of Lovewell Terrace Apart. And it's just a stupid advertising one-page website that says like, down the road, opening soon. There's a line in the Lovewell Terrace, it's a line in Ceremony where he says, avenues all lined with trees, picture me as you see love grow forever. And so I was like, oh, Lovewell Terrace Apartment. It's right down the avenue, all lined with trees. And, so it's like dumb things like that. Like, I don't know where that came from. And then somebody made it a meme last year and it blew up all over the place. And I was so mad. But I was also like, that's it. That's like, that's the job. Like, we're here to inspire, and we lift and we take. and we don't cry when stuff is lifted and taken from us. So if you like any of my ideas, they're yours now. Help yourself.
I also want to respond to the person who said they were a letter artist, I believe you said, right? Everything that Steve said about showing up is just dead on. You just show up every day. Every day you show up. It's the discipline. It's the work, trying to find a way of balancing that marriage between the creative drive and the fact that it's actually a job or a vocation is, one of the great struggles that working artists have, working creatives has, right? So that's something one should never ever lose sight of. But, the idea of trying to break through a particular impasse when you feel as if they're creatively, that you just can't necessarily figure out what is next, right? Understanding that, obviously music and visual art are two different, mediums, but one of the things that has always worked for me is when I find that I am at that impasse, that I do something that terrifies myself, and then I try to do it again. And then I try to do it again. Something which just feels so incredibly uncomfortable from however it is that my workflow or my vision or wherever it is that I go, doing something that terrifies me. And the moment that I find myself in a place of comfortability in that terror, in whatever decision that I've made creatively, then I know I've kind of made some sort of breakthrough. Whether that's the answer or not, wherever that's going to inform the final outcome of it, but it's without question a tactic that allows you to just kind of think in a non-binary sense of how it is that we create. So,
yeah. On that note,
word. Let's go.
Let's get one more. You say.
May I go first on this one?
yes, please.
Well, first of all, I think that you're right about that. It's super easy now for people to kind of go on TikTok or whatever it is and to kind of create a particular success and be able to monetize off of that and and create some sort of some sort of metric that gives them some sort of status or financial stability or whatever. But that's been the story for as long as time has been around, man. There's going to be people who've taken the short ways around and people who've put in a lot of work, and I don't think that it's necessarily the type of thing for guys like us to be like crying over, But I will say this. I just think it is very interesting, specifically with graffiti, right? I think about one thing, like, back in the day, back in the 80s in New York City, there were full cars, right? So there was a subway car that was painted top to bottom, end to ends, right? They call it an end to end or a top to bottom, whatever, right? And the city of New York, under the mayorship of Ed Koch, I believe, they had a huge campaign, which was to get rid of graffiti, make your mark in society, not on society.
Classic.
And then if you look at it now, almost every city that has a major metropolitan rail line has giant top to bottom, end to end screen advertisements for Zyrtec. Right? So, I don't know if this is answering your question, but, at the end of the day, I find a particular peace and resolve the fact that, okay, listen, we kind of, I don't want to say helped recreate the wheel with what it is that we did, but
We put rims on it.
yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's super fun that graffiti is like on this high accepted level. we knew it was heading that way, but it was really weird when we were selling advertising in the mid 90s in New York, where we take these meetings at major record labels, and like there's a few occasions where we were invited to a meeting and the guy sat us down. He was like, I'll never advertise in your magazine. Like, graffiti is a cancer and it's on my block and it lowers property values. I'm like, I'm great. Glad we had this meeting. Like, you know, but I really love your artists. Your artists are great. And they only promote positive messages about selling drugs and, you know, but it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, there'd be one person in the room that'd be so mad about graffiti and that's evaporated now. Like, that's like not happening. And we always thought graffiti's no big deal. It's just paint. If you don't like it, paint over it. And if you don't have the energy to paint over it, the sun's going to take care of it. Just how many problems in your life is the sun going to take care of? Not many. So don't worry about graffiti. And, you know, it's come around at a point where, you know, when people write graffiti, like, people stop and look and they're like, oh, that's cool. They're like, that's not scrolling on your phone. That's like doing something. That's interesting. And you see it over and over again, like people filming like graffiti vandals, vandalizing. And the passerby are like, wow, that's really interesting. They pull out their phones and they're filming it too. So I think the very core of graffiti, the actual like black spray paint on a wall, you can't commodify it. You can't make it. It's nothing to like merchandise out of. So I think that keeps the kids engaged, and, you know, it's still cool that way, which is kind of amazing. Like, in a way that like it's shocking to us, and it's great to see that graffiti still has cachet with the youth of America and the world. It didn't have to be. Like, it could have just been, I don't know. It's amazing. Like, and skating too. Like, you know, yeah, it gets bigger and it gets more recognized and it goes different places. But at the end of the day, it's like the kids having fun is like the heart of it.
Yeah.
And that's still beaten.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I think that you're right on about that. I mean, the breakdancing was in the Olympics this year, right? You know, and, you know, DJing is whatever it is, right? And, you know, when it comes to rapping, we're talking about like, you know, kind of these 4 hip hop elements, hip hop, rapping is almost indiscernible, you know, from pop music and country music and hip hop, right? You know, so, you know, those are all things, you know, which are kind of within the concentric circles of our disciplines, of our mediums, right? You know, and graffiti is kind of, to me, the one thing that cannot ever be co-opted, you know, because by nature, and by definition, it is against. It is almost anti in a sense, right? You know, and you're absolutely right about how, you know, people will be, you know, taking photographs of these crummy vandals. They're doing this or they're doing that, and people say, "Oh, that's cool," because it is cool. It is cool. But, you know, to me, that's one of the things about our art that is the most pure and really lends itself to the idea that ultimately it's the generations that follow us. It's the youth. It's the kids, you know, because they're always going to be on our heels. They're on my heels right now, you know. They're always going to be coming up, right? You know, that LCD song.
I love that song.
Losing My Edge, right? You know. But yeah, the youth are always coming up. And guess what? The youth always win. They always win. That's the default, you know? And one thing about the youth, and it's weird to me, I literally just turned 50 years old and I feel like I'm still 19, you know what I'm saying?
You look 19.
Thank you. I love you. One thing about the youth, right, is you just kind of got to get out of their way, because you could say X and they're going to say, no, it's Y. Because why? Because they have to do it for themselves. That makes any sense. So
it does. I mean, I can flash back to, I guess, to bring it full circle. Like, when we were young, we made a video, as was the style at the time, to make graffiti videos. We were filming each other, painting graffiti. And we had an idea. Maybe it was Cosmo's idea, Cosmo and Ray. to go into South 9th Street Records.
Yeah.
Was that your idea?
No, it was Ray's idea, but it was
Your selections?
yes.
So it's such a cool piece of video. You can find it on YouTube of Cosmo going into a record store and just cherry picking hundreds and hundreds of dollars of records, just pretending like he's finding them for the first time. I think you brought your own collection into the shop.
Yeah, that's my own collection.
Sprinkles them around the record store, and he's basically offering like a how to find great records video. And he's just pulling out like all these records that are samples. And as he pulls the records out, you're hearing the sample that was sourced on that record. And it's all very identifiable and very exciting. And it's hilarious. And it's like a young Cosmo looking just about like this with a hat on. And he approaches our friend Bob, who we miss very much. And Bob flips through the stack of records and he's like, just give me $2. So cool. And,
it costs a lot more than $2, but
it was definitely, even Cosmo at that age spent, money on those records. But it was a very charming, it's a very sweet, very optimistic video. And it's like, this is a youthful person of, I think, 20 at the time, like collecting these records, collecting 50 or 60 years of history before him and finding joy and finding his life's work in it. And, he was the youth that we saw and we got out of his way, even though he was just right behind us. And so the story goes on. And I know he's done that for like tons of DJs and tons of artists every step of the way. Like he's a teacher. And so we teach. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
So we've talked about, your relationship. We've talked about music. We've talked about art. As we wrap this up, is there anything you want to say to the people here? Your first time in VB ESPO. It's good.
It's very beautiful to see like how much live music is happening here. So many Fleetwood Mac cover bands, but it's so cool. It's like it's a really great, vibe is the word, but it's a great place where they place an emphasis on music like that and they make it available and people participate. Like people turn up and they watch and they love it. And, it's great. It's as first impressions go. It's a great first impression. I think you have something really special here.
Yeah. Norfolk is a wonderful place. I think this is my third or my fourth time here. Between here and Virginia Beach, that's going far back as like in the '80s when I came down here to go to see a contest at Mount Trashmore.
Shout out Mount Trashmore.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this area is just wonderful, and you can kind of really feel the spirit and the vibe in the community, right? Just for all of you coming out here and checking us out,
Yeah, it's a great crowd.
Which is really, really great. So thank you all, and I want to shout out my man Eric. Where is he? Eric, right here from Thank You Gallery.
Thank you, Eric.
You helped put this whole thing on.
Shout out Eric.
The idea of showing up, right? And the idea of showing up for your friends and showing up for your community, I see that and I feel it here, and that's definitely something that I think more of us should continue to do in perpetuity. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so tonight, Cosmo will be at Only You. Hope to see everybody there.
All of you.
Tomorrow, Steve and the ESPO Art World crew will be doing live screen printing. Thank You Gallery, Virginia Mocha from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. But just want to say a huge thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time, talking with us. Let's give them a round of applause.
Arigato.